Here we go. So, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to have your guest, Claire Kelly, she's an amazing immigration consultant and founder of Claire of the World, environmental activist, and youth leader. So, how are you today, Claire?
Yeah, I'm great, Andrea. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So today we're going to talk a little bit about your education, your political involvement, and also your work as an environmental activist. So beforehand, why don't you just tell us what you're doing currently?
So right now I'm an immigration consultant, as you mentioned. I have my own private business called Claire and the World Immigration Consulting. And so I help clients mostly from New Brunswick, primarily international students who have graduated and are trying to figure out how to stay as a permanent resident, because immigration is big and complicated. And so I've have a background of almost 8 years in immigration, and so I can help navigate them through that. I like to clarify immigration rules, and but I also get contacts from around the world. Like in the past few days, I've spoken with folks in Uzbekistan and Dominican Republic and Argentina and like Colombia, like everywhere. So, and those are more so people who are coming to New Brunswick to study or to come as an immigrant. So it's a really cool job. I love the work I do. Yeah.
I bet. It's awesome to hear that you're doing your work. Well, right now with the online shift, it's great to hear that your work has able to transcend borders itself, not people who just come here, but people from other parts of the world.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. So you're a Mount Allison graduate and also a Rice University. Concerning your studies about your master's degree and on your undergraduate degree, can you tell us what inspired you to pursue your major in English and psychology and master's in immigration and settlement studies?
Yeah, it's a good question and something I haven't thought about in over 10 years. But I was, reflecting on this, and I originally was all signed up to do international relations at Mount Allison, which is a great program there. Like everyone who I know who graduated with that is brilliant. But when I looked at all the courses that I was registered for, I don't know, there was something about it that I was like, these aren't me. Whereas in my first year at Mount Allison, I had taken a couple psychology courses, and I'm naturally a people person, and I really liked to understand how people work. And I was kind of deciding if I might become a teacher, and I really was already interested in kind of English as a second language or an additional language teaching. So I kind of, when I created that template of like courses I could choose, that one seemed more me. So English and psychology is what I ended up going with at Mount A. And as you'll learn, maybe from a few other questions, I got my involvement in like international like education kind of through experience. So that was great. So I don't regret that at all. Like I loved my psychology degree and my English courses. But then with my master's degree, it's a whole other story. I had a bit more time to think about it, because I actually didn't, when I went to Mount Allison, I did not plan on doing a master's degree after I finished my undergrad, because when I went to Mount A, it was like 2005, and that was before the recession of 2008.
Yeah.
And so when I was going to undergrad, like not many people did master's or PhD unless they were going to become a professor or a doctor or dentist or whatever. So that was never part of my plan. But I graduated into the recession, and all of those introductory jobs kind of just vanished, right? And I had already planned to go teach English in Japan. So that is what I did. And while I was there, and when I came back to Canada, I realized that there weren't many jobs, for introduction. So I was like, well, I think I'm going to go back to school to get a bit more education. And it's interesting that we're going to talk about a bit of immigration, but also environmentalism.
Yeah.
When I was living overseas and traveling, in addition to living in Japan, I was also traveling around. And I've always had an international interest. I thought maybe one day I would be like a diplomat or work in the foreign service for Canada. But unfortunately, at that time, the Conservatives, like Stephen Harper was our prime minister, and I was not very proud to be Canadian living overseas. Like two big things he messed with. He pulled out of the Kyoto Accord, like like the current Paris Agreement. Back then it was the Kyoto, and Canada. He pulled Canada out of that, which I was very disappointed in. And he started messing with our immigration system, and those are two things that I feel very passionate about. Canada doing well in, right? Like those are two things that I care about a lot. And so when I decided to do my master's degree, it was kind of, I was like, I want to come back to Canada. I can't represent Canada if I don't feel proud about what's happening in Canada. So I came back to Canada, and between environmental studies and immigration was more lined up with what my education and experience had been. So I decided to get a master's degree in immigration so I could learn immigration inside and out. So I knew what I was working with, and when I wanted to, tackle not tackle the government directly, but I mean, like, I wanted to get more involved and see what I could do in the big picture of immigration. So that's why I did my master's in immigration.
It's great to see how like all your passions together were always like able to overlap ultimately. Both your passion for people itself, like socializing, and also like education, international relations all together. So I am I admire you for that. Talking about that. But about your travels, can you tell us a little bit more about that? What did you learn about, for instance, what the educational system looked, and also what hardships that you encountered whenever you were traveling abroad?
Oh, that's a really good question. So the education side is actually a really good one, because so I did work in the public school system in Japan, and something that I really loved and admired there, the first two things that are just like jumping out at me. No, actually, I should mention three, because obviously having foreign, international teachers within the school system, first of all, is a really cool thing that the government does there, right? Yeah. Having actual native English speakers come in and teaching English is a pretty cool program. I think more education systems around the world should implement that. But the other two things that I really liked was I really like, Japan is more of a community-based, like more social. I don't want to say like socialist country, but like it has more of that group think, like as in it's not so much individualistic but collective society, right? And you saw that in the school system. And one thing I really liked from a young age, because I taught once a week at the elementary school and 4 days a week at the junior high school. And in elementary, junior, and high school, they have every afternoon, for lunchtime, everyone serves themselves. Like as young as 6 years old, they're responsible for serving lunch to others in the classroom. And that happens in elementary and junior high school. And at the end of the day, everyone in the school, so students and teachers, clean the school. They only have one, janitor or groundskeeper that, does more upkeep. But what I really liked about that was just the community aspect of that everyone is responsible for serving and helping everyone and keeping their environment clean. And I just, those are a couple of things that come to mind that I really liked about Japan. So I really wish we could take some of those elements and implement them here. Like the food was also very healthy and local, so that's something that we could easily do here in New Brunswick. So
yeah, it's interesting to experiment with disciplined cultures such as the Japanese culture, and it's a very welcoming culture from what I've heard as well, and from my friends that have also studied abroad there. And it's great to hear that. Just going back to your involvement on campus, can you tell us about Eco Action too? And what other involvements on campus inspire you to pursue your environmental activism as well?
For sure. So with Eco Action, and it's interesting because now at Mount Allison, there are two environmental groups. one is eco action, which is still very much like consciousness raising of our environment and the climate crisis in general, but there's also Divest Mount A, which is more of that big policy push to divest our the money, you know, from oil sands, from fossil fuel industry, right?
Yeah.
So at my time, there was only one. There was only eco action. Divest Mount A didn't exist back when I was at Mount A. But eco action, you know, we were kind of the environmental activist group at the time. And a couple of programs that I really enjoyed being part of was Campus Climate Challenge, where every residence on campus was in a competition to be able to reduce their energy intake, like consumption. And it was a challenge amongst all the residences, and you know, there was a winner and everything. And that's something that we created back then, but it still exists now, which is pretty cool to be part of that legacy. We also we did a big demonstration on, again, this is before Fridays for Future and everything, but we, like, Buy Nothing Day was a big thing, which it lines up with Black Friday. So, you know, the day where everyone goes shopping, the opposite of that is buy nothing. And one of the striking image in my mind was that we got from facilities management to gather all of the garbage that is collected on one day at Mount Allison and put it in the main, like, kind of student square on campus. So you could actually see how much garbage is collected in a day at our university, just to like physically show you, you know. So those were a couple of things, you know, that really, as I said, like consciousness raising, like just making students and staff and faculty more aware of our consumption and how harmful this is. So those are a couple things I did with Eco Action, but yeah.
It's awesome to hear. Will you consider your advocacy procedure or like path starting during university?
Oh yeah, like I think university was an amazing place to, especially small liberal arts universities like St. Thomas and Mount Allison, because they're small enough, I'd say like a student body that you're not just like lost in like thousands of students. What you do and what you say or what you organize actually makes an impact, right? Yeah. And so that's what I loved, having that base, because it really does prepare you to have, you know, leadership roles within that campus community that is perfect training ground for the rest of your life, right? So as I said, being part of Eco Action, I had my own feminist radio show. I also I was the International Center student assistant, and I led a field trip to New York City with 40 Japanese students. Like, you know, looking back, I'm like, how did they trust me as a 20-year-old to take 40 international students? But anyway, you know, it kind of gives you those roles of leadership, responsibility, but also, you know, not huge stakes, so that, you know, like it kind of gives you that space to do your trial and error, right?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
so
great.
certainly planted the seed, like, you know, going forward to everything. If I look back, I'm like, oh yeah, of course that was started then.
So your piece of advice to like university or college students would be to, if they pursue this kind of careers in the future, is to like have this trial and error procedure during university, right? Yeah,
definitely get involved during your university or college time, because it really does, you know, it gives you things to put on your CV, of course, like your resume, but it's bigger than that. Like, you know, some people do it just for that, but I think what they're also hopefully learning are those transferable skills, like those skills that you'll be gaining that will impact the rest of your career path or education path. So
yeah, absolutely.
Or political path or what. Anyway. So.
You can have the shift, for instance, you can just start like as an activist during college and advocating for rights, and also like to the institution itself. But it's great to see your shift, for instance, that you pursue this like advocacy in many levels, just not in the environmental movement, but also in the migration movement as well. So I congratulate you for that. It's absolutely awesome. So my other question would be, how do you implement this knowledge in your work as an environmental activist? What skills did you gain from both your education and involvement in campus that is fundamental to your work nowadays?
Yeah, well, again, like I think that it was in university that I first learned about the climate crisis, right? So before that time, I grew up with like Captain Planet and like, recycling and reduce, reuse. But I didn't really, I knew that it was the right thing to do to like make sure we have a cleaner environment.
Yes.
But I didn't fully understand like our carbon emissions and the actual stress and limit we're putting on our planet and what that will mean for increased disasters and storms. So it was in university that I learned that education, like that knowledge, right? So taking that knowledge again, like that has obviously led anything that I do, and I hope others are like this, that learning the facts, like knowing, like opening your eyes to what is actually happening instead of the day-to-day, be aware of the big picture, like why this stuff matters. But it also, as I said, like my roles in university, whether it was Eco Action or whether I was also, social chair of my residence, and I got the honor to be like the valedictorian at the graduation. Like, so just giving, having those experiences. I was also in like theater, like getting involved even in minor roles in theater gives you more practice to, for example, like, future presentations you might give in your company or what have you later down the road. So all of doesn't matter how small or big it is, like it likely will help you with something in the future. And so yeah, that's definitely what I learned from Mount A was the knowledge of the climate crisis, but also the confidence to listen to your voice, to voice your concerns and what you feel is important. So
that's good. It's awesome to hear your path and how one can shape one's voice, right, throughout this path, like regardless if it's something like campus, and it can be a small interest group, for instance, but it can turn into huge things, because it's awesome to see that Mount A also has a diverse group now.
Yeah.
And that you were able to be that part of the seed that contributed to all these projects they have now.
Exactly. And when I was actually working at Mount A a few years ago, when divestment was very active, and as an alumni and a staff, like I was very and as an alumni and a staff, like I was very supportive of their movement. So yeah.
Perfect. That's awesome to hear. So now, concerning your involvement with the Green Party, what was your first step in pursuing a political career and becoming part of it in 2019?
Okay, so this also goes a little bit back, is that my mom actually ran in the 2015 federal election. At that time, my parents and I was also working in Victoria, BC. So that's where she ran, and she actually ran in the riding right next to Elizabeth May, who was the former leader of the Green Party. And so I just finished grad school. I was just in my first job in immigration. I was quite busy, but my second full-time job was basically working and volunteering on her campaign. Just door knocking, going to every debate, every interview she did. I tried to be there for the whole step of the way. And to be perfectly honest, every time she did a debate or an interview, I had such like butterflies in my stomach. Like I was so nervous on her behalf. And so it's funny because I remember thinking in 2015, like maybe when I'm her age, like much older, maybe I'll do it then, maybe I'll have the confidence or the skills to do something like that way in the future. I did not think it would be as soon as it was in 2019. But what happened as you likely know, being in environmental studies, the 2018 IPCC report that said that we had 10 years to change everything, like to cut our emissions in half, or else we would be on a path of runaway climate change or climate crisis. And so that really got me, it really woke me up again. It kind of gave me that sense that I had back in university. It's like, I need to get more involved. And of course, like, you know, individual actions are so important, but these big fundamental like policy changes is what's going to make the difference. And so, and I didn't, you know, I think the Liberals have done a decent job on a lot of things, but when it comes to the environment, like, I don't think they have been bold enough. Like they, yeah, I'll leave that as a polite statement. Like, they have not done a good job on the environment file. And so, I decided, okay, I would get more involved in the Green Party, because that is the party that I saw that was actually serious about climate action in our future.
Yeah.
And so January 2019, I was living actually in Fredericton, and I attended the provincial Green Party riding association's annual general meeting, and they were looking for a new president, and because the former president was actually your professor, Janice Harvey, and I, you know, she said, would you be interested? And so I decided, yeah, you know, I was looking for ways to get more involved, and there it was. So I became the president of the Riding District Association. So that got me immediately more involved at the beginning of 2019. And then when I was living in Fredericton, for the second spring in a row, there was significant flooding.
Ooh.
And I don't know if you were living there at the time, but like 2018 and 2019 saw, like, you know, historic flooding. And to me, that was a bit of PTSD. I lived in Japan during the 2011 tsunami and nuclear disaster. And so I don't know, it was just that reality of having the water so close, like, you know, a couple streets away from my apartment, and just, you know, thinking about all the international students I know who have been in more severe tropical storms, like in the Caribbean. And it just really, it's like, okay, this is hitting us like at home, right? This is now. And so I decided there wasn't any more time to waste. Like, we needed more voices, and particularly younger voices who are going to be impacted by climate change longer than the average politician in Ottawa or Fredericton right now, you know? And so in 2019, I decided that I would put my name forward as a candidate in the federal election. And I decided to come back to Moncton Riverview Dieppe, because I grew up in Riverview. So like, that's where I grew up, elementary, junior, and high school in Riverview. So that's where I decided to run. And yeah, and I did it. I did it. I ran. I didn't win, obviously. I'm not an MP, unfortunately, but I did significantly raise the vote from 4% in 2015 to 18% in 2019. So it was pretty awesome. And Fredericton got an MP, so a Green MP. So pretty cool. So that's kind of my general path into the Green Party.
Great, that's absolutely great. It's interesting to see how you went from like this indirect like change maker to going directly to political institutions itself, and given the opportunity of educating people, because, you know, ultimately you mentioned something very important. The problem with climate change is people lack like knowledge of it. People do not know that the clock is ticking at this moment, and we got to act as soon as possible. But about the young audience, can you share your experience about winning the elementary, middle, and high school during like the votes during your campaign as well?
Yeah, so as a former teacher, former youth worker, and like still very much engaged with international students, so still youth in a general sense, it was really important for me during the campaign to visit any school that invited me. And early in the campaign, like when we got our first invitations to go and speak with these schools, the Liberal and Conservative campaign organizing groups contacted our organizing group, our campaign, and said that, you know what, there are too many requests. we're not going to go. We're actually, neither of us are going to attend the elementary, middle school, or high school events.
Oh.
And they said, you know, I think you should also not attend. and you know, it was campaigns are very busy, and of course none of that demographic can vote. So strategically, it's like, well, you know, I understand that strategically they were like, they're going to spend their time elsewhere with people who can vote. But for me, it was incredibly important to show up to anyone who asked me, because in the schools, because it's particularly because they can't vote, right? So if, you know, most of those folks, or a few 18-year-olds, but like anyone under 18, you're going to represent when you're a member of parliament. They are part of your community and riding. And even more so when we're talking about the climate crisis, like the decisions that we make in Ottawa or in Fredericton or in City Hall are going to impact their future.
Exactly.
And so I find the least you can do is go and show up and answer their questions and explain why you're going to do what you're doing on their behalf. So yeah, I went to every elementary, middle school, and high school that invited me, and it was awesome. Like, they had the best questions. So it really actually prepared me for a lot of like other debates and interviews. But yeah, I loved it.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite parts of the campaign.
It's awesome to hear that you were able to participate, because not only that, they're the future voters too.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So they need to be aware of the issues and what party actually will represent them in the future as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
I love to see hear people in Fredericton itself, very involved in politics from a young age, as you can see. So it's awesome to hear that you were able to attract this very young audience on your behalf, and that you actually took the time and explained to them your goals and your aspirations for not only New Brunswick, but for Canada itself, if you think about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
No, it's super important. So
besides raising the votes for the Green Party, what do you consider another fulfilling accomplishment during your involvement with the party?
Yeah, so I would say, I give three, and I've already kind of mentioned two. So
Yep.
One is that I did raise the vote from 4% to 18%. That was a pretty significant accomplishment.
Yes.
Number two is that I actually did officially win the student vote. So there was a student vote across Canada, and I won that vote. So if students were able to vote, I would have won this riding. But the third was that I don't know, I feel really proud that I got more people engaged in politics, and particularly women, and particularly young people. And one way that I saw that almost immediately, not only I heard it a lot. Obviously that's not exactly why I was running. I was running for the reasons I've explained. The climate crisis is real, and that we need to have more voices talking about it and changing things. But what was very cool to see was that I think a lot of people don't see themselves in politics. They think that you have to be a lawyer or older or a man, And one thing that I really loved to see was that in the 2020 SNAP election at the provincial level, in the riding of the federal Moncton Review Dieppe, there are 7 provincial ridings, okay?
Yep.
And my proudest accomplishment is that my campaign manager and I had a goal of trying to fill that entire area with all women candidates, and we succeeded. So all seven ridings in that provincial election were all women, and that was huge. And then what has come from that has been, after that election, with a few of those candidates, we started an organization called Femocracy Now, and that organization is also leading to a lot of progressive women running in the municipal election. So it's just the ripple effect is something, yeah, I'm very proud of to be a part of that. So I could say that.
You're like, I admire you for your multitask specifically.
thank you.
You get to involve all your passions, and they're not only fulfilling, but you actually have accomplishments with them. So it's awesome. That's very inspiring.
Thank you.
But about your current career and the environment, tell us about your positions as the International Student Advisor and International Affairs Coordinator. And do you consider these positions as your start point as your profession right now?
So,
yeah.
I mean, I'd actually and again, this goes back to maybe people who are listening. I really consider my professional career in this field to have started when I was the International Center student assistant. That really gave me my first job in the world of international relations, and so I actually, I don't know if people might not consider that part of my professional experience, but I certainly do. And teaching in Japan is part of that building block. Being a youth worker in Victoria, incredibly important of my work out there. But yeah, most recently, of course, because my career is kind of, even in the international realm, it's kind of split into two, international education and immigration. Luckily, more and more they overlap, right? But yeah, here in New Brunswick, I certainly consider my my professional career to have started again at Mount A, 6 years ago, and having built ever since. So working at Mount Allison, working at MBCC, and working in the provincial government, all with the goal of helping more immigrants.
Great to hear that you did all these programs for international students, more or less. But
Janetta. Sorry, I don't know.
Fulfilling completely. Here is one question that I really would like you to worry us a little bit more about it. So how have you implemented your environmental activism into your new path of immigration consultancy? And where do you think you find both fields can intersect, more or less?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And when I saw your question, I was so excited to hear you ask that, because I'll be honest, I in 2019, in December 2019, I had the chance to go to COP25.
Oh.
So the UN's big climate change conference. It was supposed to be in Chile, but it got moved to Madrid, Spain. But when I went there, I brought this business card with me, and it actually says, hi, I'm Claire, Canadian immigration advisor, environmental activist, determined optimist. Those are my 3 categories. And some people were asking me, they're like, oh, immigration and environmental activism, how do those go together? And the fact is that I actually see that they go together. They certainly impact one another, because what I see when international students or immigrants come to New Brunswick, I mean, they come for a variety of reasons. They come for maybe just a slower pace of life, smaller communities, could be, more stable government, a safer place. Could be, I've met so many students who come for LGBTQ reasons, they feel they can actually be themselves here. So many amazing, awesome reasons. But the one thing I particularly hear when coming to New Brunswick is that they come for clean air and our environment and nature. And I think that's awesome to hear, but it makes me a bit sad, because what that's also saying to me is that, so much of the world is, becoming very much polluted for things that, a lot of which are used in North America, but produced elsewhere. And so, and also that's where more environmental disasters are already happening, right? I talk about flooding, but if we think about the many other, whether it's heat waves or more hurricanes or whatever, we are already, in my opinion, seeing what I could categorize as environmental refugees, but they are privileged enough to be able to come through education or our immigration system. And so, and what's really also sad is that, and I got this question because I was the immigration critic during the federal election, and someone asked me, they said, how can you support having more and more immigrants come to Canada when they're coming from a much smaller carbon footprint to a much larger carbon footprint. Like on the Sustainability Development Index, out of 164 countries, we are 159 as like least sustainable place in the world. And so, you know, it's like, how can you justify people coming from a small carbon footprint to taking on our bad habits in a large carbon footprint? And, you know, what I would respond to that is, you know, it's like, well, that only shows us that we have a lot more work to do. We have a larger responsibility to not to take on our bad habits. We need to really seriously improve our habits. We need to live more sustainably. We need to, decarbonize and work on that, so that, like, I don't think we should be barring anyone to come here because of our bad habits, if that makes sense. Like, so it just means we have more work to do, way more work to do. And that's why I still believe so much in our multiculturalism and immigration. And I want that to continue, but we need to be shrinking our carbon footprint. And so that's why I see it's actually a pretty perfect match. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are inspired because, well, as a foreigner, I can tell you, like, we observe Canada as a very green country itself. And coming from a developing country myself, we are victims of very like wasteful industrialization processes back home because we produce manufactured goods, for instance. And it's great to see how encouraging that is for you to actually change the habits here. And also, like, I wanted to ask you something else. With your work right now, where do you feel that you stand as an environmental activist too?
Well, so two things that I could say, you know, like, obviously my career, the way I am able to pay for my living, you know, is through immigration consulting. Like, that is my paid income. But my environmental activism, of course, is the way I live my life, right? So as we talked about earlier, like, individual actions cannot be denied. Like, we need to improve our individual actions. But I'm also very involved still with the Green Party. Yeah. And on the most recent formed Environmental Action Committee in Moncton. So at a municipal level, I sit on that Environmental Action Committee. At a provincial and federal level, I am very much involved in you know, elections and campaigns, but also behind, you know, not behind the scenes, but like an ongoing annual basis with the functionings of the party. So because I do believe we need more environmental, more, like, you know, big and small green voices in every level of government. That's what I've always felt. So that's where I stand. My environmental activism is supporting every avenue that is going to get us closer to our goal. So individual, group action, and of course politics, because policies do happen in Fredericton and Ottawa. So yeah.
It's great to hear that you have both direct and indirect influence, in the sense that your lifestyle itself is according to environmental ethics, for instance. And you also pursue your career both in immigrant consultancy and also your involvement in the Green Party. You do have direct access to actually advocate for this rights for the environment. So it's very fulfilling and inspiring to see that you don't necessarily have to be like a politician itself, or you need to pursue like this international relations career. With your English and psychology major, you were able to accomplish so much. And I bet many students are very inspired to see that it's not only about a degree, but it's about the actions in every step you take, right?
Oh, for sure. It's what you do with it, right? So
yeah. So I have another personal question. So
okay.
Yeah. So about what piece of advice will you give to any student that currently feels discouraged by the climate crisis that we are like currently like facing?
Yeah. First of all, I totally empathize. Like, I find myself in that situation as well occasionally, you know. But I think it was Dr. Courtney Howard, one of the candidates of the federal Green Party leadership election or campaign, who said, you know, action feels better than anxiety. Like, it's like, you know what, channel that channel what you're feeling, which is totally legitimate. You know, like I have my like emotional breakdowns all the time whenever I see discouraging decisions made in our province or in Canada or elsewhere in the world. But you know, this isn't the time when we can all give up. Certainly take breaks when you need it. That's what I would certainly say is, you know, take breaks, but don't give up completely, right? Like it's really important that we do keep the pressure up on our elected officials, on our, whether it's, as I said, a federal, provincial, municipal level, whether it's the group that you are a part of, whether it's the place you work. You know, it's so important that all of these actions are taken. That's how we are actually going to save our own future. So it's totally fair to feel overwhelmed. Do take rest when you need it, but don't give up. I'd say, like, you know, keep going. So
keep going. So
yeah.
Once again, thank you so much for coming here today and sharing your experience, both as a student and as an immigration consultant, and most importantly, as an activist itself. Yeah. So any last words you'd like to add?
No, thank you so much for having me on. This is such a great project that your class is taking on. So I'd love to see the final product when it's done. So keep me in the loop. And yeah, to everyone out there who's in this course, yeah, the best of luck with you with your studies and in the future.
Thank you so much, and thank you for hearing, everyone. So hope you have a great day and keep on going with the activism, remember.